You're listening to the Southern U Podcast, brought to you by Darton Archery on the OKest Podcast Network, with your hosts Taylor McMurtry, Jerremy Ferguson, and Matt Brock. Hi everybody, welcome back to episode number 6 of the Southern U Podcast. I'm Taylor McMurtry, and joined as always, AL Deer legend, Habitat First
Can
Properties.
we just say Matt Brock?
No, we can't. No, it's Matt. It's the AL Deer legend.
It will always be
Matt Brock.
the love of AL Deer.
And the other resident biologist, Mr. Jerremy Ferguson.
Who is not the favorite on AL Deer.
I'm not the favorite either.
Have you lost that momentum?
I'm just saying there's probably as many people on there that have major heartburn over me as don't. But anyway,
I figured that.
I feel like it outweighs. There's a lot more fanboys than
I've met some great people on there. Really, I mean,
Yeah.
I've met. There's some good folks.
I figured the dress just kind of bounced you up all the way to the top, and you'll forever stay there.
It's all right.
Yep, and we are still in the killing cabin. If you know from the last episode, unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate with us, and no woodland creatures were harmed.
No.
In the making of either of these episodes.
No, they're not going to be when you stay in bed.
Yeah.
No.
But
No.
unlike most of the year, we got some sleep.
We did. It was kind of nice. So
It's a rarity.
yeah, hard rain on a tin roof, man. That's
where it's at.
that's a recipe for some sleep.
That's where it's at. Yep.
So, today's episode is another one that I say this every time, but I really am excited about every one of these topics. But this is one that's kind of unique for us being here in the South, because we're going to be talking about the southern rut. And basically, this will be another one of the 101 content, 101 episodes. If you live in the South and you want to hunt the rut, we're going to kind of take a deep dive into how to do that and how to do it well, and how to scout for it, those sort of things, because it's a little bit different than your Midwest rut. I mean, everything from timing to habitat, all those sorts of things are a little bit different. So, guys, unless you want to, unless there's anything else, we'll just dive right in.
Let's do it.
Ready? All right. Very first question here is, what are typical time frames for the rut in the South? And I know that's kind of a loaded question.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But because we got the South is weird, we've got a lot of diversity, or a lot, in habitat, but also in the times for the rut when it peaks. And certain areas you have deer running crazy, while other areas are completely dead, nothing going on.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna.
Unlike the Midwest, you can't do it in a couple of week period. You got to have several pages on your calendar open around here.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they lose their velvet about September, and somewhere they're rutting.
That's right. Yeah.
That's true.
About then, and they'll rock along till their antlers fall off in March or April.
Yeah, I think the only state that has a more diverse rut than Alabama is probably Florida. They've got deer rutting down there 12 months out of the year, I think, depending on where you are. And heck, we've had so many stocking sources for deer over the last 100 years that we have everything from late October to mid-February.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are.
Late October.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, do tell, because I need to hear about these places.
Over along the Chattahoochee.
Yeah, Georgia line.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, we just call it the Chattahoochee River influence, but it's just those deer right there on the Georgia-Alabama state line. They're early. I mean, those guys they're done. They've been done for a little while.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, any speculation as to why? I mean, is that just like a different, I don't want to say subspecies, but is that a different population that was brought in from somewhere else, and that's the reason they rut like that? Or is it just kind of a geographical thing? Or
I don't know, because I'm not familiar with Georgia's stocking history.
Me either, but most of Georgia is pretty early from what I remember. I only lived in Georgia for a couple of years, and it was central Georgia.
Central Georgia is November.
It is, yeah. The southwestern part of the state, best I recall, is quite a bit later. Gets on into December, maybe middle part of December.
Yeah, I looked at the rut map for Georgia within the last 48 hours, and southwest Georgia pretty much is the only place that has a December rut. Everything else is October, November.
That's wild. The Southern U podcast is brought to you by Darton Archery. For over 70 years, Darton Archery has been leading the way in archery innovation. With over 30 patents spanning over 60 years, it's easy to see why many archers and bow hunters have chosen to shoot a dart. Darton's patented dual sync cam system gives the archer 1/4 inch draw length adjustments, adjustable holding weight options ranging from 85% to 65%, and the super easy to tune E system for quick adjustments and perfect arrow flight. For more information or to find an authorized Darton dealer, visit dartonarchery.com. That's DartonArchery.com.
Yeah, and different areas, I think different factors influenced the rut. You know, in areas that are prone to heavy flooding in the wintertime, you may see it earlier. And I think it follows different resources, different parts of the state, you know, some kind of limiting factor or some environmental factor that, over thousands and thousands of years has pushed their breeding times or their successful fawning times into certain windows, and once they're successful there, that's kind of where they land.
Gotcha.
I mean, if you look at most of Alabama and Mississippi, the native deer, you're looking at December to early January for most of both of those states. Now, when you get down into the boot heel of Mississippi, southeast Mississippi, and southwest Alabama, that has shifted more toward late January and early February.
Right.
And then, some population factors play in to
True.
that. When you've got a heavily skewed buck to doe ratio, like many places, especially here in Alabama, have, the rut gets drawn out because there's not just a ton of breeding age adults in the population that are quote unquote successful breeders. Fawns, I guess, potentially can breed. They really shown not to in most research.
Most of the South they don't. Midwest more common, but mostly.
But our yearlings absolutely are in the breeding pool, and they do a fair amount of breeding.
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I know it's I think that is kind of unique, though, just about the South, because you have one state over in Georgia that's wildly different in terms of the time frame.
Yep.
And like here, and where me and Jeremy are at in Marshall County, I mean, you're looking at it at the very least, a Christmas time, into December rut, and most of the time in that kind of area, Marshall, Jackson area, you're really looking at more like January. And so it is kind of strange how there's so much, it can be wildly different depending on where you are.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, even in close proximity, the deer here. Well, let's just take. There's a club down the road. I'm not going to name it here, but we did fetal reproductive studies there for years, and their average breeding date, 2 to 3 miles down the road, mind you, their average breeding date is about 10 days before it is right here. And then if you go 15 miles east of here, they start getting the influence from the deer that were restocked from Stimson
Right.
Sanctuary, which is down in southwest Alabama. They have a later breeding date. So if you get over around Wolf Creek Management Area in eastern Fayette, Walker County, that average breeding date is like January 31st to February the 4th, 5th, 6th.
Yeah.
You're looking at.
And see, Jackson County's got the same. They had some deer from Stimson up there, so there's parts of the Jackson County that it's always had deer. Even when there were no deer, there were a few hanging on up there. So you've got your typical native deer rut dates that are going to be sometime in December, mid-December, and then you get down into certain parts that it's, like Matt said, 5-6 miles away. It's January,
And
late January.
That creates all kind of issues for deer managers.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, which I know I mentioned it on the last episode, but that lease in Randolph County, when people were trying to explain, like, the draw of this club is you get to hunt a split rut. You have this place it was called Rock Mills, where the week of Thanksgiving, things are just deer running everywhere. And then after about, 10 days or so, 12 days, it's a ghost town. There is nothing going on over there. And it's like, just switch gears and come back to Rock Springs, to that property, and it's more of a traditional rut. And if I had not, again, you guys have more experience in this kind of field than I do, but I had never experienced anything like that before. So it was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, honestly. If I hadn't been there to see it myself, my own eyes, it's like, okay, man, whatever. But it's a real thing. And they're, like you said, 5 miles apart,
And what most Alabama hunters don't get to encounter is, you talked about that being a 10 or 12 day period. Most Alabama hunters do not get a concise rut. It's a trickle along.
Yes.
And, it lasts for, once you kind of start seeing some quote unquote rutting behavior, the scrapes and the young bucks pushing, man, that lasts 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's I don't think that a lot of people understand the amount of stress that places on the population either, especially the buck segment of the population, because when they've got that intense competition for that extended period of time, it really drags them down.
And that's why, Matt and I have not been in favor of the extended season here in our part of the state. Different parts of the state, it's okay. But, that's the main reason behind why we weren't real supportive of it in our location.
Right. Well, and I think, Matt even said it on that episode, was like, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing in certain areas, but a blanket statement across the entire state, like, absolutely not.
Why do we have deer zones? We have deer zones for a reason.
That's true.
And we use breeding dates to justify earlier seasons in areas where it was needed. And then we open it up wide open to the middle of February for the whole state.
Yeah, that's
even
true.
in areas with earlier ruts. That just doesn't make any sense.
Just counterproductive.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
We don't get to make those decisions.
No, we don't.
No, that's true.
Especially now.
No. We've got less input than we used to have.
That's funny. So, just kind of in that same spirit, this next question here is, I guess we're going to get more down to the science of it, I guess, but what's a typical estrus cycle for does? Like, that's why you hear people talk about your primary rut and then your secondary rut and that kind of. Could you guys just kind of maybe shed some light on what that looks like in the South? Because it's different.
Does are hardwired to come into estrus at the same time every year. You can debate all day long what role the moon play. There's no rutting moon.
They're doing their thing.
They are going to come into estrus at the same time every single year. Now, observed activity can change according to weather patterns or moon phase.
Okay.
But from all the fetal reproductive studies that have been conducted for decades in every single state, the conclusion has been the same. If you take location A, every year the majority of does are going to come into estrus within a couple of days.
I start to say, best I remember, our average was somewhere just slightly over 48 hours.
Right.
Within, what we took.
Wow.
Is, within a, and it's not an exact science, but it's pretty dang good. But within a 2-day window, man, those does in that location were coming in.
That's when they're going to come in. And so, when people say, I think the rut's earlier this year, I think the rut's later. No, it's not.
It's just perceived activity.
It's perceived activity. It's what you're observing. And that can change drastically. That can change from one day to the next.
Absolutely.
But, your does are going to come in the same time every year, every single year.
And that's going to last roughly 28 days.
Okay.
Right. So they'll come in, either they get bred or they don't get bred. In a healthy population where you've got enough deer, enough bucks in the population, a buck is going to be with a doe and tend her for 24 hours or longer.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to breed her several times until either another buck pushes him off, or they've bred and he moves on to the next. And that is precisely why I fight so hard to get people to understand that having mature bucks in the population is important. It doesn't matter what's on their head. I'm not worried about what's on their head.
Mm-hmm.
Just having mature bucks in the population, because you need deer breeding does, experienced deer breeding does. Now bucks of all ages are going to breed.
Right.
Yeah, the young bucks are kind of like we were when we were teenagers. They
So happy to be there.
they were, and they're like, "Ooh, I'm going to chase this one today." And while he may have the opportunity to breed that doe, by gosh, another one comes along, and he's going that way.
Yeah,
it's not too picky.
yeah, they're equal opportunity. By gosh,
Right.
It's funny. I love watching it because you'll see all these young bucks spending so much of their resources on chasing. They're just running around chasing all the does that they can chase, and then it's fun to watch a mature deer step into the picture, and he's just like, "All right, show's over, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not running her. I'm not chasing her. She's mine. You can accept it, or I'll show you. But
Right.
I'm taking over now." And that's a big shift in behavior that I've seen between bucks in the 2 to 3 year old age classes and then the older bucks.
Mm-hmm.
When they show up on a hot doe,
Yeah,
they don't have to chase her. They're not going to chase her.
I mean that, and we go a lot back to how deer act in the Midwest, because they generally act a little bit more like a deer, not scared to death all the time.
Right.
Our deer are scared to move.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you'll see, a lot of times on a hot doe, you're going to see multiple bucks, and generally speaking, the last buck in the line is probably the most mature, the one that's like, yeah, I've got this locked up. All I'm going to do is follow along until it's right, and I'm going to let these other knuckleheads
Kill each other.
Yeah, kill each other, chase each other around, and he's not generally in a hurry.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. Larger, mature bucks that are behind does are generally just kind of trailing along. They're not actively pursuing or chasing.
Mm-hmm.
They may be grunting and staying with her, but they're not chasing.
Yeah. So I'll ask you guys this too, because I've got my own, not theory, but I've just got my own experience with this stuff. In the Midwest, you see a lot, and even Jeremy's got some footage from where he went out to Kansas and stuff, where bucks running with their mouth wide open, tongue hanging out, just completely gassed, chasing does around. Do you guys typically, or have you ever seen that in the South? You see that in Alabama and stuff?
Depends on the property.
I was going to say, I've never seen that. I've seen bucks run some does around. I've never seen that kind of just, I've even seen in the Midwest, drool, all over their mouth. They're just done. You know what I mean? I've never really seen that in Alabama or the South in general. So.
It has a lot to do with the sex ratio and age structure of the population, which we have a completely different sex ratio and age structure in Alabama than most of the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because our season is so long and so many bucks get harvested.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
It is, and I've seen the same behavior in Alabama on certain properties that are managed, where the ratios are right. Then you'll see the same type behavior.
Okay,
and even unmanaged property where there's a lower deer density, you'll tend to see that, because there's just less opportunity. So those bucks are up moving. Mm-hmm. They're trying to take every opportunity they can, and they may have to cover a lot of ground to do that.
And as far as deer health is concerned, it's better for the deer if they have a really short, intense rut that lasts 10 days, 14 days, rather than a third of those does not getting bred. They come in again 28 days later. We do the whole process over.
Oh, I gotcha.
And it wears them down.
Yeah.
It really wears them down.
The Southern U podcast is brought to you by Tethered. For the last 5 years and counting, Tethered has pushed the boundaries of what mobile hunting looks like. Thanks to Tethered, gone are the days of having to haul heavy gear into the woods in order to hunt from elevation. Their lineup of tree saddles are lighter and safer than other methods. And saddles are not the only thing that Tethered has made better. Their complete lineup of sticks, packs, and other accessories have streamlined the process of getting to your desired hunting area and doing more of what we all love to do, hunt. So if you're ready to ditch the bulky, heavy, and loud hunting methods of the past, check out Tethered's complete list of products and gear at tetherednation.com. That's TETHRDNATION.com. Yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk about some of this stuff later, but because you've said before, like 11 months out of the year, deer are enslaved to their stomachs.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the window where they're kind of not.
Mm-hmm.
And so if
this is when they act stupid.
Yeah, this is where they finally make a mistake and
Mm-hmm.
act stupid. So I guess like they're not eating like they normally would eat. They're not, you know, or at all. You know,
their primary focus is breeding,
Right.
and that's what and the only exception that I've seen to that is when we're talking about mature bucks. A lot of times I see coming out of the rut, the 5 and 6 and 7 year old bucks are still in superb condition compared to the 2, 3 and 4 year old deer.
they're just
Because they're not spending as much of
Yeah,
their
that's
time
right.
and energy actively chasing does.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
But, you know, they usually come out of rut faring much better than the middle-aged deer.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, you mentioned that our, 28 days and our rut being drawn out, and it may be 2 or 3 cycles because we have a skewed sex ratio, but the hot topic of deer with spike on one side, especially here in the South, that is the primary reason for that. Our bucks are getting damaged because they're fighting and still displaying rut behaviors as those pedicles are starting to turn loose or start to dissolve. It takes a little bit of time for those pedicles to dissolve and antlers to fall off, and if they're still got a little bit of rut behavior, it doesn't take much to damage one of those pedicles.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not genetic.
No, it's not genetic.
Occasionally, but
there's a place that I got to hunt in North Alabama that is it's private property and it's bow hunt only. So the deer are really not pressured very much, and there's also not very many deer that get harvested every year off of it. And one of the few times that I've actually gotten to witness some legit like rut activity, like in the woods, I had what I thought were about 7 does on top of a ridge, and they were working down to me about midway down a bottom, and I'm just watching them come down through here in a single file line, and they're all going to come about 26 yards from me, and they are progressively bigger as the line goes. So the ones in the front are yearlings, and then you get some bigger does, and then sure enough, mature does in the back. Then all of a sudden I look up there and see it, and there's a big, just slick, wide forked 6-pointer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just running. I don't know that he was running all of them around, but I'm saying he was the only buck, and there were 7 does, and probably I guess maybe 5 or 6 of them were eligible, for him to breed. But I'm just saying, like, I thought, oh my gosh, man, he's these does he's gonna drag him right by me, and because this was even though it was a 6, it was an old deer, and could tell just immediately from looking at him, and naturally the very last doe decides to get to 40 yards and go directly away from me instead of bringing him down. But I'm just saying, like, I mean, he was like typical nose on the ground, running her around, and that was like. You guys, I haven't talked about this much, but I used to be a student pastor a few years ago, and I was on a winter retreat, and my pastor calls, and he and I hunt this property together some, and he calls and he goes, man, as soon as you get back from this winter retreat, you got to get up here. These deer are running crazy. And I'm like, really? This would have been like December the 28th or 9th or so, some just after Christmas and before New Year's. So we finished that retreat. I go hunt, and that's when all this that story happened. And but it was like just like that. It was like it was over. You know what I mean? All that happened, and you get all pumped up, excited.
I know where you're talking about now, and that's that's a function of the deer density there.
Yeah, I mean,
Part of it. That's a
lower,
low deer density.
The lower the deer density, you're gonna have a really quick rut.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, there's hardly, it's bow hunt only. So, I mean, if 7 deer are taken off that place in a season, that's a lot. You know what I mean? And it's I mean, I don't say it's a huge place. It's a relatively big place, about 500 acres-ish, maybe a little less than that. But because everybody up there has, a bow and arrow in their hand, it's just hard to kill more than that, really. And anyways, but I just want to share that because that's like one of the few times that I've actually seen, legit. And it was as fast as that happened, it was over. It was just boom, done. So you'd think with not taking very many deer off the property, there would be an overabundance of deer there. But
and that's part of what we talked about, last episode is that part of the world in the Cumberland. Its recruitment rates and its fawning rates are relatively low. So even though you're not taking a lot of deer off of it, they're just not producing a lot of deer on an annual basis.
That's true. Which, and I have killed several coyotes off that property too, multiple out of the same tree. So, there's probably something to do there too.
There's plenty of natural mortality that's associated too.
And another question here, which I know we've already sort of touched on a little bit, but what role does the weather play for the rut, if at all? I know you said, hey, it ain't got nothing to do. They're going to come into estrus at the same time, but you mentioned observed behavior may change, or it may vary, whatever. Is there any way to expand on that or talk about that a little bit more? What hunters are seeing and versus what's actually happening?
The only thing that I will say on weather affecting rut timing is extremes one way or another. If you have extreme drought or extreme wet, then that could affect the timing. I know some of the leading deer biologists this year say in the Midwest is experiencing a trickle rut because of the drought that we had or that they had. I don't know.
It wasn't trickling where I was at.
Right.
It was on.
And like here in Alabama, we actually were unseasonably wet until August, September, October.
And then unseasonably
right.
dry.
So we went from wet to dry, and people are still saying, this was a drought. It's not a drought year. We had a drought period. And, deer seemingly not affected by it at all. I don't expect that to change our rut timing at all this year because deer are in superb condition. Every deer that I've seen taken has been very healthy.
But I bet we're going to hear of a less sightings, less harvest during the rut because all these guys are wanting to sit on green fields.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And there's not one.
Yeah, there's a surplus of acorns in a lot of areas. I mean,
all
lots
about
of
the acorns, baby.
It's all about the acorns. And then we're going to have a lot of landowners that don't have food plots because we've had such a dry period. And the people that wanted to go back and replant couldn't find seed. So a lot of the seed stores, they didn't purchase additional seed to make up for that.
Oh, yeah.
So there were a lot of people around here that wanted to replant, and they would search around everywhere for seed. Nobody had anything. So
it's amazing how everything affects everything. You know what I mean? Like it's all tied together.
And for crying out loud, guys, don't break down and buy Marshall ryegrass.
Please don't.
Everywhere.
Yeah, just don't. You'll be making a mistake. But going back to your question, temperature has a lot to do with deer activity during daylight. They just move better in colder temps.
Absolutely. They've built up some fat reserves. They're got a thick winter coat on, and it turns 70, 80 degrees. They're still doing their thing. It's just when it's dark, when it's cooler.
Yeah, or in thick cover. I've
just
seen
moving less.
They're just moving less in daylight, and that would give off the impression, oh, the rut's not happening, or it hasn't happened. What's going on this year? Well, I promise you they're rutting. You're just not seeing it.
Yeah, if you guys we've talked about does and kind of coming into estrus and what role that plays, but could you maybe talk a little bit about how I don't know how to phrase this question. How does buck behavior when it comes to the rut, like would a buck be all about chasing does around in
Anytime.
Or would it? Or is it? You know what I mean?
Once they shed their velvet, they're in rut. They're ready to go.
If they found
they're just waiting on
they
a
found
doe.
a good candidate, they'd be ready to rock out.
Yes,
absolutely.
They're just waiting on doe to come into estrus. And a guy sent me a video just a couple days ago of a 7-point breeding a doe 10 miles down the road, a full month before breeding season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now is she ready? I don't know. I mean, she allowed the breeding to take place.
Right.
She acted like she was
So
ready.
she must be.
So she must be. You know, she must.
And
be
there's
in estrus.
outliers.
Oh yeah,
everywhere.
There's outliers. You know, you have your average, and then you have outliers on either side.
Yeah.
But you know, that would be extremely early for here to have
Sure.
Thanksgiving breeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So bucks are pretty much ready to go.
Oh, they're ready.
Yeah, they're ready.
They're ready. Yeah.
Like any male.
Yeah. Yeah. I was about to say. Not gonna get too picky about timing. That's funny. I guess kind of this fourth question here. I feel like we could probably spend the rest of the time talking about it, but how does somebody properly scout for the rut in the South? Because I guess in other seasons or other parts of the deer season, you're targeting food sources or you're targeting kind of travel or bedding or something like that. But when you've got the rut, it's almost like all bets are off. Like, I mean, how can you really narrow down where these deer are going to be?
All bets are off because they could be absolutely anywhere. They can come from any direction. But I'm relying heavy on those travel corridors from bedding to food. I want to know by that time of the year. I want to know what trails my does are taking to food sources and back to bedding, because at that point, really, you're just wanting to hunt does. You can't get a buck typically on your radar and just focus on what you think he's doing, because he's not doing what he wants to do. He's doing what she's doing.
Well, she allows him to do.
Yeah, so you find the does, you find the bucks.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. So, most people around here will say that, like, don't worry about those bucks. Don't, you know what I mean? You kind of have a general idea where they've been, but if you find does, like, at some point they're going to get hot.
That's it.
And when that happens, it's kind of like a live decoy at that point.
It is. There's no better bait than a doe that's in heat.
Yeah.
And I hunt the rut a little bit differently than a lot of the mentality around here is. A lot of people, I just want to get where I can see. I want to see. I don't do that. I hunt thick. I hunt really, really thick in the rut. And the majority of big deer that I've killed on does, I couldn't have made a 20 or 30-yard shot. I mean, that's as far as I'm going to be able to shoot them.
Yeah.
I'm hunting thickets that I know does are traveling in, and even if does are not there, the bucks are going to be using those thickets to travel from where they've been to where they're going. And I don't, I know this is going to sound really strange. Through the years, I have not had very good success in January. That's when everybody I know kills their big deer in January. I don't, never have. I kill them in December, November, December. And January, I guess I just let everybody else do their thing because.
Well, you're always tagged out by then.
There you go.
The rest of us are left with the
Some
scraps.
years that would be the case.
Well, I mean, there's two racks laying over there, the other side of the room, and one at the house that on this property here. I killed them either on December the 17th or 18th.
Oh.
3 years in a row. Just
I have often said, if you want to kill, if I want to kill a big buck, a deer I'm after, I'm going to kill him between December 18th and 26th.
Because that's just the recipe for here.
Well, this is my theory. You've got all these young bucks going nuts. I mean, that's when everybody starts, the rut's really kicking off around Christmas. It is, and what I think you're seeing, it is hard to see mature bucks at that time. Really hard. unless you're hunting in the right places. They're in the thickets tending the first few does that are coming into estrus. Our does start to come in around that third week of December.
Like everything else we talk about, you got your bell curve.
That's right.
So you got these first
we're
ones
on that
coming
climb.
in.
We're on that climb on that bell curve, and all the big bucks, they're on does. They're not running around chasing does like all the young bucks are. They're already on does, and that's when I'm usually successful. When all chaos breaks loose after Christmas, I don't have success then. I don't.
I have been much more successful. Of course, Matt's been hunting here many more years than I have, but I've been over here, nearly 10 now. You take that bell curve and you chop the middle out of it, I'm successful at the front end and the back end.
Okay, gotcha.
Those mature bucks trying to pick up those first few.
Yep, or the last few.
Trying to pick up the last few. So I don't, I'm over here hunting during that middle part, if I don't have other stuff going on, family stuff, work. But if I'm going to focus my time, it's the early part and the late part. I let everybody else have that middle.
I would take the first 2 weeks of bow season over peak rut here every year, every single year.
I love early season. I feel like, number one, you're a little giddy just to get out there. You know what I mean? It's been so long since you've been able to get in the woods, but also you've got, a lot of food, and which can make it a little more difficult to, like this year, there's acorns everywhere. So how do you know what I mean? How do you figure out which acorn tree? You
don't.
I mean? Well, you just kind of have to figure it out.
You just hunt.
Yeah, this was the first year in quite a while that you didn't kill a mature buck in the first 10 days. Generally, you've got a really good solid deer down the first 10 days.
Usually I do.
And you just had poor weather patterns.
It was very poor weather, a lot of warm days, southerly winds. I don't have a lot to hunt with a south wind. And then the deer that I did end up killing with my bow here, I saw him several days prior to that. And I was hunting a hardwood ridge that had acorns all over it, deer sign all over it. Hadn't had a camera in there, no cameras anyway, on this whole track. No cameras, no corn. I was just hunting, and I happened to catch a couple of deer moving to the hardwood ridge 350, 400 yards away. So I picked up my binoculars, and I got to looking, and I was like, that's 2 mature bucks. And there's another mature buck. And there's another middle-aged buck. And there comes another buck. And there comes another buck.
Gosh.
And there's does. And they're all feeding on these white oak acorns on this other ridge, and I'm like, I just picked the wrong place to be. So the next time I went in there, it's kind of ironic. I was just talking about south winds. I needed a southeast wind to get in there and hunt it properly. I was like, my better weather, I can't hunt that. I can't hunt on northwest wind like I want to. So 5 days later, we had a southeast wind, and I hauled in there about 3:30. It was a little bit late. And as I was climbing up in the tree, I had 2 deer walk out, and my bow's still on the ground. Of course, they're young, but it'll all be in the video. But I videoed those 2 young deer, then I had a couple does come in. Everything's going great. I got my bow up without spooking anything, and I'm just sitting there at like 4:45, and I looked over, and I was like, there he is, 150 yards, coming straight to me. He gets in there and feeds around within
sweet time.
Oh my gosh, it's agonizing.
Typical Matt Brock too. I mean, they just appear out of thin air, and he's not going to be one of those guys that sees them 3 or 4 times and plays chess with them. They just kind of walk up underneath him and raise a leg. And
it's all about play. No, I wish that he would have. I waited and waited and waited and waited on a shot for this deer, and I had several shots on him, and I actually drew a couple times, and like we were talking about with the video equipment and all that kind of stuff, it inhibited my ability to make the shot that I wanted to. And I finally got him around just over 40 yards, and I was like, gosh, I really don't want to shoot this deer that far. Like I kind of set a personal standard at about 35. I mean, I can hit targets all day at 60, 70 yards.
Right.
Without any hiccup. But it's different when you're shooting at a live animal.
Absolutely.
And especially southern whitetails. I'm sorry, you people hunting in the Midwest, let me tell you something. You have no freaking idea what it's like to sling an arrow at a southern deer. You just don't. You don't. Their brisket will hit dirt. And that arrow will go right over their back, sometimes at 20 yards.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm shooting at a deer at 45 yards. And I settled in on him, and I was like, you better shoot low. At this distance, he's going to drop. It was dead silent. I mean, there was nothing going on, no wind.
Yeah, in the video, it looks like, we all like calm weather, so to speak.
This was too calm.
It's too calm.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is.
It looked dead.
You can hear crickets. I mean, there's just like crickets chirping everywhere.
Well, that deer's 45 yards away, and on the video, you can hear it chomping acorns.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You can hear it. Like that's
right.
quiet, man. There's not a whole lot going on.
Yeah, that's how quiet it was.
And that veracity he's shooting is a quiet bow.
It is.
And
got one too.
It's fast.
It's fast, and it sounds. Unfortunately, it sounds loud.
It's like,
but it's so quiet. I think we were texting when we were in Kansas one day. I'm like, I don't like hunting like this. It is too still.
Yes. For Kansas, it was eerie.
Yeah, it's pretty windy out there.
It's normally windy
It's
out
always
there,
windy.
and me and him were talking like it's just too calm. I don't know how to handle this, but anyway, so yeah, I was able to get that deer, and hopefully we'll have that video out pretty soon. But that was, gosh, what day was that? November.
I don't remember.
So a week before you left.
It was a week before I left to go to Kansas.
So it would have been the first week of November.
I think 7th, 8th, something like that.
6,
I don't
7, 8.
know, but either way, that was a little bit later. I've normally had an opportunity to shoot a mature deer by November the 1st each year, but.
Yeah. I want to come back to something that you mentioned about the rut. I know we kind of got off on an early season tangent there, but you said that you really like hunting thick stuff for the rut. I know you said, like, I guess for travel and that sort of stuff, but is that because the bucks try to like tend those does in the thick stuff, and that's kind of why you like that?
Yes.
Or is it okay?
And I'll add this. People come to me and like, man, I've got this big deer on camera. He's nocturnal. I'm like, no, he's not. He's not nocturnal. He's moving somewhere in daylight. There's no such thing as a completely nocturnal deer.
Nope.
You've got to figure out where he's moving, and I promise you, he's moving somewhere in daylight, and it may be for 45 minutes, but you need to be there during those 45 minutes that he's moving. And I find that a lot of these mature bucks that I'm getting on camera at 11 p.m., 1 a.m., they're moving 200 yards from that location all day long. Mm-hmm. You just got to be there. Yeah. And thick areas is where I find them doing.
What's cool about the Midwest, and I talk about, deer being deer, but you get out there and you can see forever in some of these places. Those deer, they'll bed up, and you can see them just in a little thick patch out in a field or something. Every few minutes, they're up moving. Mm-hmm. They may not move 10, 20 yards, but they're up moving back and forth. They don't lay down for hours and hours and hours during the daylight period and just stay put. Mm-hmm. They're moving somewhere. You've just got to find where that is. Deer are exactly the same here. They're up moving somewhere. You just got to pinpoint where they are moving.
And a lot of the big deer that I've killed here would not be there, and then they were. I mean, it's just like they stood up. They were bedded down the whole time. I didn't know it, but they're there the entire time, and they just stand up. And that's all I need him to do. Just show me where you're at. I'll kill him. Yeah. I just need to know where you are.
Right. Give me that location.
Yeah,
man.
just give me your
Drop
location.
Me a pin.
Yeah.
Need to know.
But they're tending those. They're using those for travel corridors.
Yeah. Well, I guess this may have been the last time. Trying to think back, this may be the last time I took a rifle to the woods, but that same place that I've referenced a couple times with the split rut, that same lease, the last day of the season there, it was like uncharacteristically hot that day. Mm-hmm. And I decided to hunt the edge of like a pine thicket. And long story short, I heard something behind me, and I just kept hearing it, but it was so thick behind me I couldn't see anything. And I'm just like that. I mean, it sounded too big to be like an armadillo or squirrels or whatever. It was like that has to be a deer. It's got to be. And I end up finally, I catch horn, just a glimpse of horns, moving through that stuff. And it took me 20 minutes. I watched it for 20 minutes before I finally shot, and it was 8-point killed it. Text my dad, hey, got one down, okay, sounds good, whatever. No kidding, 15 minutes later, I hear this in the same spot. More noise. I'm like, what in the world is going on, And I finally figure out, I'm like, that's a doe. Like, there's another deer out there. I had no clue, not proud of this at all, but I had no idea there was another deer there. I had shot through him and dropped him and hit her because he was tended to doe. He was with her.
Didn't know.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, I had kind of clipped the spine of her. I don't know how they were laying, what I mean, how I have no idea how that was oriented, but ended up killing a buck and a doe in the same shot.
Oh, yeah.
But it was because, like you're saying, they were bedded up together, and he was not about to leave her. He was going to stay right there, and so I've kind of taken that similar approach during the rut. Is like, I don't really like to hunt the thick stuff because I do like Jerremy. Hey man, I want to get to where I can see. I want to get where I can see what's going on, but it just kind of tends to be where they're at.
Yeah,
I'd like to bed up in that stuff. The Southern U podcast is brought to you by Vitalized Seed. What sets Vitalized Seed mixes apart from other companies is their ability to keep producing throughout multiple periods of the year. The symbiotic relationships between the different varieties support soil health while being extremely attractive to a variety of wildlife and important pollinators. If you're looking for a product that is going to benefit all of your wildlife and help you put deer and turkey in the freezer, ask your local seed dealer for Vitalized Seed. And for more information, visit vitalizeseed.com. That's vitalizeseed.com.
Well, there was several years ago, I killed a really good deer, and I had them on camera crossing in between. There was a gap in a barbed fence, and it was really thick on both sides, but that was the only place that they could really cross, which I have learned in the Midwest, those deer don't think nothing about jumping over a 5-foot fence. I mean, like nothing. I would look at some
underneath.
Yeah, I would look at some of these places, and I was like, there's a deer trail right here, but I don't know about hunting it just because that fence is so high. Well, I would hunt it, and deer of all age classes would just walk right up to it, right over it, and keep on with life, And down here, they look for gaps and easier ways to get through those things. So,
like any other Southerner. That's right. They're good and lazy.
That's right.
So, anyway, I hunted this gap, and I was late one day, really late getting home from work. And I thought, there's just no way I can get in there with enough time, but I need to go today. This is a killing day. These are the days that I kill things. And we'll have an episode on that one day because I don't hunt like when most people are at the house, I'm hunting. But it was, the wind was blowing 25, 30 miles an hour.
Weirdest thing. He swears by hunting in just brutal winds, and I'm like, nah.
I've got data. I mean, I've got all the information from every deer I've ever killed and what the weather was doing that day. By far, my most successful days on big deer in Alabama are 25-plus mile-an-hour winds.
Golly.
Well, I'm not going when it's.
I mean, it's just like that's when I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
And that was one of those days. And because the wind was blowing so hard, the deer couldn't hear. They can't really see that well either because everything above them is moving back and forth. So you can get away with a lot more movement. And I got in my climber. It was after 4 o'clock. And I got up in my climber, and I hadn't been there 3 minutes. And, I'm glassing, looking around, and 30 yards from me, I see a rack. And I was like, that's him. That's the deer I came in here to kill. He's bedded down 30 yards from me. Never knew I was there. And I never knew he was there.
That's crazy.
And he stood up right then. It's like as soon as I saw him, he just stands up. He turns his head, licks his back, flicks his tail.
Gets shot.
He gets shot. He dies right there.
Made him famous.
But, that's those thick areas like that is just where I have a lot of success at all times of the season. It doesn't. This was with a muzzleloader early in the season.
Okay, gotcha.
So
and when you're talking about thick cover, because I know where you hunt and we hunt a lot together. Explain a little bit about thick cover. You don't necessarily mean, thick clear cuts that can't be hunted, because I like seeing a long way, but
I mean like grown up clear cuts.
Yeah, you're talking about stuff that you can see a long way, but you're only able to see pockets.
Right.
In there.
You have to pick a shot. You may see a deer. You may see a deer in a pocket and not be able to shoot him because of brush, debris, limbs, whatever.
Yeah, you don't mean a thick pine plantation that you can't hunt.
No. These are areas that are huntable. You just have to select your shots very carefully.
Yeah, a little more early succession type habitat. That's some of it may be overhead high, some of it may just be knee high in places.
A lot of these areas are clear cuts or select cuts where the ground level vegetation has had anywhere from 3 to 6 years of growth on it. So that's when a lot of people quit hunting those areas.
Oh yeah,
because you have limited visibility.
People like to see.
They do. They like to see, and
I love to see.
I'm perfectly content sitting there and seeing one deer
because it might be that one
if it's the one I'm after.
Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you guys, because I know we've kind of talked about like, hey, look, deer are going to move during the daylight hours. May not be much, but they're always going to move. They're not 100% nocturnal. A term that gets thrown around here in the South is the December lull. Like that's something that people will talk about. Like, oh man, there's no need to even go to the woods during that time because the rut hasn't started yet, or it's or whatever. And in the Midwest, it's October. It's the October lull. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Don't even get off the couch. Is there any legitimacy to those terms, or is that just something that makes us feel better when we want to stay home? When we don't want to get out and hunt?
Well, deer activity definitely decreases. One, you have the effects of pressure. So everybody gets in the woods the first couple of weeks. You've got opening weekend, then you have Thanksgiving, then you have early December. Everybody's hunting, and it shuts deer activity down. So regardless of our rut timing, you've got that factor. Then you have that little push where a lot of these younger bucks are starting to harass does, and does are just like, all right, fine, I just won't move. I'm going to get somewhere thick, and thicket somewhere. I'm not going to move because I don't want you messing with me. So deer activity really decreases. I'd say for today's December 2nd, isn't it? I think
so.
So from now until about December the 15th, it's going to get really, really slow.
Yeah.
And I think lull is probably, I'm going to play semantics here just a little bit, but Matt mentioned that, you go from the first part of the season where deer are acting like deer, and then there's a lot of pressure. I think I don't think this quote unquote the deer activity is changing based off of deer influence. I think it's all people influenced. You get in the woods, they're acting like deer. They hadn't encountered human activity a whole lot, and so you're seeing a lot of movement then. Well, that pressure starts to impact them. They start to move less, but then you get into the rut and the movement picks up. So to me, it's not so much a lull as they're being pressured, and that's how they're going to act the rest of the season except for during the rut.
Yeah.
And you just have to adapt as a hunter. Like, I mean, I don't really experience a December lull because I changed my tactics a little bit.
Well, we don't.
And we don't put a lot of pressure on
Yeah, we don't
anyway.
hunt like a lot of people do. Now there's a lot of guys and a lot of clubs that are very successful, kill a ton of deer and a lot of young bucks, but there's a lot of people in the woods, deer being bumped, they get up, they move. We got cell cameras, so we know when and where deer are moving. Baiting's legal. So we've become much more efficient at killing deer even when pressure is really, really high. But I think that's what makes us maybe as compared to our surroundings or our neighbors that surround us, we're uber successful at killing mature bucks. But, if the weather's not right, we're not going in the woods to where, I'm a weekend warrior too over here because it's 3 hours from my home. But if I check the weather out and it's not going to be right, I'm not for my stand locations, I'm not coming over here.
Unnecessary pressure.
Yeah,
Right.
but a club down the road, or any of these guys that's hunting that don't take those factors into account, man, they're going to the woods. They're just going
every
Well,
opportunity.
especially, I feel like local people. If
Yeah.
you live close, well, just go get in the woods. You
Well,
know what I mean?
and
Like,
one thing I heard constantly through the years, it running over 1,000 hunting clubs for a timber company years ago was, by gosh, I paid my $1,000 to be in this club, and I'm gonna kill my deer.
That's right.
And so it didn't matter what the weather was like, what the deer was like. Come hell or high water, they're killing deer.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's that's their right, but that to me is the wrong mentality. Because I would venture to say that the hunting club cost, the lease cost, is the smallest part now. Even though they've gone up tremendously, and most folks are probably paying, what do you think, $1,000 a year, good average here.
Yeah, I mean it's
Probably.
Up to way over that. I know.
Oh, yeah.
I know of some clubs that are. I know a couple that are nearly $10,000 a pop.
yeah. If you're going to maintain low pressure and more acres per hunter and try to manage for mature deer, you're going to be paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 anyway.
Yeah, and that's by what we're doing. By the time we plant some things on our limited acres, that's about what we're paying.
It's a chunk of change, and especially it's a lot of money with the expectation that I might kill a 130-inch deer.
Yeah.
And that's for a lot of Alabama hunters, that's about all they can expect.
right,
There's
yeah.
a lot of mature deer
Well,
out there.
and it's not for everybody either.
No,
You know what I mean? There's
no.
some people that are like, hey, man, I got no interest in that.
Right.
You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
I want to kill something big, I'll go to Kansas or I'll,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it is tough, too.
But the pressure, it all boils back down to that. I think when when you talk about the lull, I don't think it's anything related to deer biology, so to speak. It's all about how we're impacting them and their movement patterns.
So obviously this isn't a real scenario, but yeah, let's just say that the does never come into estrus. Is it just like they stick with that lull behavior, being locked down the rest of the season?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? The
They're
rut
gonna-
is what brings them out of that, I guess.
They're going to act pressured, and if you totally remove the rut out of it and the increased activity, their body condition is going to be great going into the winter, and they may move even less, just as an effect of being in good condition, not having to be a slave to their stomach like they are.
Well, and this is the last thing I'll ask, because we're getting close to an hour here, but I know we've talked about kind of deer being enslaved with their stomachs and post-rut, those sort of things. Where I have hunted, and all I can speak from is my personal experience, it seems like even in late season, even in late January, and even now that we have this, extended season in February, there's Chinese privet, there's hackberry bushes, there's all kind of browse that a deer can eat if they want to.
Absolutely.
In the South, absolutely.
Yeah, and don't necessarily have to go hit your feeder or go hit your
No.
whatever. And so I have always been of the mentality of, like, one of the reasons that big, like, smart, mature deer don't get killed by like what you'd see in the Midwest is because they don't necessarily have to show their face in daylight if they don't want to. They don't get that big by being stupid.
Right.
And but I've also heard kind of the opposite end of, like, you're saying, hey, look, in February, you extend that season out, their bodies are depleted from the rut, and now if you want to kill every deer on a place, you can. You know what I mean? It's possible. So,
I'd
like,
almost bet everything I own that the first 10 days of February this year, I will have every single mature deer that lived on camera in daylight hours on bait.
Really?
Oh,
On bait.
Every one of them.
That's crazy, man.
And there again, what we talked about, it all boils down to pressure.
Because I'm not even hunting then. Like I
Right.
basically quit about early January. I'm not even going to go after that. Usually don't.
If folks will hunt a place and not pressure it, you won't see that lull.
Right.
It won't be noticeable. The deer are going to act normal.
Yeah.
Like you can go over here to our place that we didn't get to go to because of the rain. Nobody wanted to sit out in the pouring rain. And I promise you, through the December lull, you go over there, you're going to see several deer every sit. Just because we don't pressure it.
Yeah.
Feel safer.
Yeah. I mean, nobody has been on it except for to fill feeders through the summer. I'm going to go top them off today, and to change batteries in cameras.
Yep.
And to plant food plots.
Other than that, nobody's ever there.
No.
Yeah.
We don't scout. We know we've hunted these properties long enough that we know where the deer are moving. We know where to go hunt certain times of the year, whether it be rut or whether it be late season or whatever. We know where those deer are going to be. I mean, we could go without cameras.
I don't scout here anymore. I hadn't scouted here in 10 years. And I don't have to. I just know through patterns what deer are going to do at certain times of the year, and I just wait and go.
And I think that's a problem with the clubs is there's so much turnover. People are trying to learn those properties.
Learn a new place, yeah.
So they're always on it. But if you can stick with a place, I promise you're going to be a more successful hunter.
Yep.
Yeah, just learning the land.
Yep.
I mean, where I grew up hunting in Tennessee, I mean, we had a tree called the killing tree. If you went up there in a 2-week period when the deer were rutting, when they were chasing does, you could shoot a buck there every day.
They just like it.
You would just run out of bucks, but you could shoot a buck there every day while they were rutting.
Yeah.
And that's where we killed our mature deer up there, and a lot of young deer died there too. But different time.
That's right.
But you can learn a property.
Yeah.
Really well.
I thought of one other question. I keep doing this, but I got one thing I got to ask too. I know just from footage that I've seen from you guys in Kansas and stuff, and you'll see it all over the Midwest. During the rut, guys have grunt tubes, and they've got rattling horns, and they're snort wheezing, and they're all right. Have you guys found success during the rut using the same tactics? Do you rattle in deer? Do you grunt in deer? Have you snort wheeze, or does that blow every deer out?
I think everybody's going to have a different answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, you've got to know that deer. In the Midwest, you have so many opportunities at different bucks. Deer densities are different. Sex ratios are different. There's more competition. I mean, I rattled in 2 days of hunting up there. I think I rattled in 7 or 8 bucks.
I rattled in several while I was up there.
Really?
And just rattle them to the tree. The deer I shot, you can hear him coming in behind me grunting. I mean, a lot of vocalizations. I've got one where, I'm not good with the camera stuff and use the wrong mic, and so I've got a lapel mic in the tree, and I rattle in 2 young bucks, and they spar, and they get out there and snort. They make every vocalization a whitetail can make, and we don't get to hear it on camera. I'm hearing it, but the mic doesn't pick it up. But I have had success here. But with cameras, we got to know individual deer. If you get enough footage, enough video or enough pictures of deer, around bait or in a field, you can kind of determine their personality. And if you can pick out a deer that's aggressive, he's always got his ears laid back, he's always posturing around feed or around other bucks. If you see that deer, you can call him in. The other deer that they're not aggressive and they're standoffish, you are not going to call that deer.
There's a lot of timid deer around here.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have success calling here. I quit doing that years ago. I just quit.
No, I've got I think it's called the Arrowhead or something. It's a little bitty grunt call. It's like this big, and it's the only thing that I have found for the deer around here that, it's a grunt tube that doesn't sound like a silverback gorilla. You know, it's like, brah, because I just feel like it scares everything off. Also, of the only deer that I've ever rattled in, I've done it one time in my life in Alabama, and because I actually rattled in a buck, I was like, oh my gosh, that worked. So he had to die. So
the only success I've had in Alabama was on Oak Mountain.
Really?
Yeah, we did the adult mentored hunts there with the state.
Okay.
And 2 years in a row, I rattled in a buck for 2 different hunters, well on up in the morning, mid-morning. Both times, no successful shot, but the deer were definitely in bow range.
Okay.
But they were young, and these were first-time hunters. I told them, I said, if you want to shoot the deer, shoot it. It's a young buck, but you lay the hammer down.
The Southern U podcast is brought to you by First South Farm Credit. If you are looking to purchase land, it's highly likely that financing will be needed. The team at First South Farm Credit understands the ins and outs of the land buying process and can help you get the financing needed to secure your purchase. Whether you are looking for that dream cattle farm or that big piece of timber to chase deer and turkey on, First South Farm Credit can get it done. For more information, visit firstsouthfarmcredit.com. That's First, F-I-R-S-T, South, S-O-U-T-H, Farm, F-A-R-M, Credit, CREDIT.com.
Yeah, if you want to. But I've rattled here, and we've got great sex ratios and age structure for the most part, and still I don't have any success doing that.
So that's not a
and I have had a little success here on a place down the road. Of course, it's a huge transmission line cut through the property, and it's pretty thick, early succession habitat, anywhere from knee to shoulder high under that thing, and I have had success there getting deer to come out of the woods and come look into that. Now, they didn't come to the tree,
right,
but they came out of the woods and came out in that power line, walked up and down it and kind of checked just to see, what was what. And, had it been a deer that I wanted to harvest with a rifle, I could, none of them came close enough to be in bow range.
Now, I've got a friend that hunts over in a couple of our bordering counties. He's killed quite a few really good deer calling.
Really?
Yeah, and I asked him, I said, how are you setting up? What are you doing? And he calls in thick cover and usually has a shotgun.
Oh,
He's like, I'm shooting at stuff that's really close. I'm on the ground. I'm rattling real aggressive grunting sequences, getting a deer to come in really thick cover, close enough to see with a shotgun. He's smoking them.
Wow.
And if I'm calling deer, I am never making one sound.
Right.
I know that you're like, huh? But I've got a grunt tube in my mouth, and I'm making noise as I'm rattling, or if, I'm depending on what the deer is doing. If he's just kind of cruising by himself, a lot of times I'll use a grunt tube, in conjunction with a can. Now, I hate the can, and I finally started seeing people post some videos here, in recent history of, man, every time you turn it over, it sounds exactly the same, and it does, and don't like it. I've always blown on the bottom of it, but I've
to make your own vocalizations.
Yes, yeah. It sounds more like a vocalization,
right?
That you're making with, your throat, like a deer would. But I finally started seeing people talk a little bit more about that. And I've been doing that, for years, because it does sound more natural as compared to, if you actually hear that in the woods.
Yeah.
It sounds totally different. It doesn't sound anything like a can.
Right.
And I played around with it, and you can blow on it softly. And you can kind of get the right tone to it, and the right cadence. It is shorter. It's not that like the can sounds like. But I'm trying to do that in conjunction with the grunt call. And I am here to tell you, if you've got a buck that's teed up, you snort wheeze at him.
Oh yeah,
they respond.
they sure do.
But that
Here though,
Yes,
Okay.
I've had deer respond to snort wheezes here.
If
Yes.
they're teed up and they're ready to rock, yes,
And
that will get their attention.
I've heard a lot of snort wheezing around here.
really?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's something to see. But I was thinking while I was in Kansas doing a rattling sequence, and the thought just came to my mind. I was like, when I get done with this, if I'm not out of breath, I'm not doing it right. I mean, really,
That's
like
exactly right.
I'm wearing the place out, and I'm not just when I watch bucks fight, they're tearing the woods down. They're breaking sticks. They're running into trees. So like I'm not just hitting antlers together. I'm hitting everything I can touch. I'm hitting limbs. I'm raking up and down the tree that I'm sitting in. And like Jerremy, making other noises and. If you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And just tickling antlers together in the rut, no, that's not what they do. If you've ever seen it, that's not what's going on.
And it's hard to do. I mean, rattling is much more effective on the ground because you can make things sound so much more realistic.
Right.
But I've done it here. I've never done it in the Midwest, just because you're moving more. It's more wide open. But here I've got a set of rattling horns laying around here somewhere.
Antlers. Can y'all please start saying
I'm
that?
sorry. Rattling antlers.
Thank you.
Shout out to okayest hunter Eric. Can't eat the horns.
I don't know. My nephew and his buddies call them horns, and I make fun of them for it. And now I'm saying it because I'm around them so dang much. But I'll rattle with them and do what I'm doing, and then I've got a rope tied to them, and I will drop them to the ground and let them hit, and they'll still tickle together while I'm grunting. I like that noise on the ground. But if I could choose the best way to do it, even here in the South, I got two people if I'm doing that. I'm having somebody tear the absolute world apart with a set of rattling antlers.
Yes, thank you.
And a grunt call, and somebody else has got a gun or a bow, and they're watching every direction,
right?
And they're ready because when they come in, they're gonna come in hot, and they may leave hot.
Yeah, that's true.
So you kind of got to be ready.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I rattled in one deer in my life in Alabama, and then shout out to Jake Kirsch, one of my buddies in Birmingham. We hunted a property that he has permission to hunt in DeKalb County several years ago, and it was during the rest of January for up there. It's kind of when the deer get on their feet moving around some. And anyways, I am just running a camera for him that day, and we're in the same tree. Had a few deer come in early that morning, but we stayed until 10 o'clock. We're gonna try to stay till 12 just because we know kind of what goes on there. 10 o'clock, I look down in the bottom about 60 yards away from us, and there's a mature buck. Biggest deer that either of us have ever seen on this property, and he's just there. Kind of like you said, he just kind of appears out of nowhere. Jake grunts at him. He comes in to about 35-ish yards, doesn't really give a shot, to him, and sort of starts to lose interest and starts to go back down in that bottom where he came from. Jake grunts. He doesn't care. He doesn't pay no attention.
He didn't see anything.
Nope, didn't see anything. He starts moving around. I grab that little call I'm talking about. The little one is immediately turns around, starts to come back to us.
Totally different vocalization.
Yeah, and he was like, "What was that?" Comes back, and I'm running a camera, and I typically don't get torn out of the frame. I was fired. I was like, I can't believe this is working. I've just never seen it like this before. Yeah. And he comes back and gives a shot. Jake was afraid to move, afraid to kind of make it work. But when he starts to come back, he's coming through like briars and just junk, and I can see through my viewfinder, in the screen of the camera. I go, draw your bow. Like, he's still 65 yards away from us. I said, draw now. Yeah. He's coming on a rope. There comes to the tree, and I don't know. I think Jake was just afraid to move, afraid he's going to get picked off or whatever. But he gets to the tree, not sure if he sees us or gets a whiff of something he doesn't like, whatever. But he takes a few bounds and ends up way down there in the bottom again. So at this point, we're just letting him calm down, and he starts to leave. Jake grunts, nothing. I grunt, nothing. Doesn't care. And I'm like, I mean, he's walking away, getting farther away every second. I said, can you snort wheeze? Do you have one on your collar? Yeah, I've got one. I said, just do it. Just try to do something. Or no, not snort wheeze. Sorry, bleat. Just bleat at him. Just try to do something he hasn't heard yet. So, okay, here he comes. And it's just like, oh my gosh, dude, this is crazy. But he ends up coming and circling around behind us.
Yeah.
If I had a bow in my hand, I could have killed him a million times. He's 20 yards from me, and he just cannot figure out where this deer is. He keeps hearing, but he works his way around us and gets in this privet, and it's basically a cattle pasture behind us. And he just kind of works away from us and gets into that pasture and leaves. But he came in 3 different times, and it was just really cool to be in the tree and film the whole thing, get all that stuff footage. It was really cool. If I can get some of that footage from Jake, I'll try to throw it together so you guys can see it. But it was just really, that's probably my only experience of having success calling one in. But
calling is a blast. We got to get Cody on and talk about some of the calling we did in Texas.
Oh, I bet that's fun.
Insane.
Oh yeah.
We'd
totally
set up
different
in a
world.
Yeah, in a prickly pear flat, and get behind one that covered you pretty good, and that's where I kind of developed you've got to have 2 guys, is doing it out there. And, he would just absolutely tear up the world, beating antlers together. And it sounded like a world-ending fight. And, you can just see a rack coming at us running. And he's like, draw. And he said, when he hits the opening, I'll say yes or no. Because that's it. We're out there shooting certain age class deer. Doesn't matter what's on their head, just certain age class. So, he's rattling and nothing. All of a sudden, there's this giant rack coming through, running. He goes, draw. I'm like, that's a pretty good ways away.
Yeah.
And he looks at me, draw. Yeah. So I just draw, and buck comes out, hits the road, just stops, and is looking right at us broadside. I'm waiting on the yes or no, and it's a booner. He's a booner all day, and he just goes, no.
What?
I did all that for nothing.
Yeah, so
sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. So I let down, and, of course, like we've talked about, they know those deer, intimately. He goes, that was so-and-so, and called his name, said, he's 3. And I'm like, what? He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, he's the best up-and-comer we've got.
Yeah.
And
you be in trouble.
Yeah. But, what were they going to do, kick me off, not let me come back?
No.
That's exactly my mentality coming here with this trip. I want to shoot one of Matt's 2-year-olds.
Oh,
but calling, during the rut is just, you gotta try it. You may not be successful, but I promise you're going to have fun. And if you do it from the ground, it's a blast.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind we could take a trip somewhere in the Midwest and hunt as a 3-man group on the ground. If we're there at the right time and call a buck in, kill him on with all 3 of us on the ground.
Oh yeah.
Just in a wad, because they come in teed up. They're ready to fight.
Ready to rock and roll.
And I'll just a quick story. We'll cut this thing off. But 2 years ago, I was in Kansas, and I had rattled in a couple of little small bucks, and they stayed in the field. The rest of the hunt. And I get down, and I'm walking out, and mind you, I've got a flashlight on. Her little red headlamp, and I'm walking out, and I look up, and I just catch a glimpse of a buck standing there looking at me. And I'm like, all right, well, he's about to tear out, and I just kind of keep walking. And I see him kind of do that, and he snort wheezes.
I'm not a deer.
Yeah, and I'm like, whoa, I'm going to have to fight to get out of here.
Oh, yeah.
And, I do that, and he starts getting closer. And it's one of the, the 2-year-old that I had called in, and he'd stayed out there, and I figured he saw me get out of the tree and left. That son of a gun was looking for a fight, and I thought I was going to have to fight him to get out of the field. He eventually figured me out, but how far apart are we? 12, 10, 12 foot.
Yeah, 10 feet.
At max, he let me walk by him at that, and he had his, it's light enough I could see, and I've got a little bit, and I've got a headlamp on. I mean, he's standing there with his ears laid back looking at me as I go by at about 10 or 12 feet. I'm like,
that'd make me a little nervous.
I was like, I'm really going to have to fight with this deer. And I've never been worried in the woods, but that one kind of, it was a little eerie.
The only time I've ever been afraid in the woods was with a whitetail in Kansas. And I had a 130-inch deer follow me to my tree.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, he was looking for a fight. I mean, he heard me, I guess, walking through the woods, got to my tree, attached my climber. I'm going up. He walks over the hill, comes straight to me. And I'm like, do you not see what I am? I'm like, I'm not a deer. And I'm starting to get in my climber, and he's coming, and he walks 12 yards, 10 yards, 5 yards, and I'm 4 foot off the ground at this point in time. And he literally comes up and sticks his nose up and starts to smell the bottom of the climber. And I'm like, I'm really glad I'm not on the ground. Once he smelled me, though,
it's like, oh,
total game changer. But he was so teed up. He was coming in to figure out what else is in here. Who is this?
It's a wild feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad he had an enclosure, and he raised deer and sell them to other,
Evil man.
Yeah, exactly. And man, you get some bottle fed bucks.
Oh yeah,
they are not.
They'll
scared
kill
of
you.
They're not scared of you at all. And he had one in particular that he couldn't even Dad couldn't even go make repairs to like the fence and stuff because it would just follow him around. And I remember, if we'll get him on here one day and he'll tell you the same story, but he had a piece of like 1x or something like that was out there by the fence, and this deer would hook its rack in the fence and just boom, just pop it right, just on the other side of the fence from Dad, and just being aggressive, just being a weirdo. And Dad was just like trying to get him out of the way. So he said, I picked that piece of wood up and I put it through the fence, and I just shove it down to try to hit him like in the brisket shoulder area. Just just get out of here.
Just made him madder.
Yeah, he said he hooked that piece of wood that I had and yanked it out of my hands before I even knew what had happened.
The amount of strength those things have is unbelievable.
Dad goes, I'm selling you. You get I don't want to get in the pen with him anymore.
Deer can absolutely hurt you
bad.
When I was at Auburn, we trapped some for research project, and we weren't darting these deer. We were dropping drop nets on them, on adult bucks, and going out and form tackling best we could adult bucks, and then giving them the juice, in the hip once we got them under control.
Oh, that's dangerous.
And we took some ass whoopings. Me and a buddy, Jordan Smith, biologist buddy of mine up in North Carolina. I mean, we took some beatings at the hand of a deer, and we're probably lucky we didn't get seriously hurt. The funniest one was one we caught he was a 4.5-year-old buck, and this was in a high fence. Okay, so they big old rack jokers. All we caught him by was his rack. The rest of his body was out of the net. And Jordan, literally jumps on this deer on his back, trying to ride him down, and grabs him by the antlers. And I'm trying to get his back legs out from under him to get him on his side. And antlers just pop off.
Oh,
they just pop off.
No.
And he's up on that deer, and the deer doesn't know he's loose yet. And so the deer's bucking like a bucking horse, and Jordan's up there kind of riding. He's got antlers in his hands, and finally he just kind of drops them and grabs hold of the deer. Y'all, when he realized he was loose, he beat us unmercifully, pawed us. Those hooves hurt.
Oh, They'll cut you,
and they are sharp.
You up. Yeah.
But yeah, deer can hurt you.
Moral of the story: don't tackle deer.
No.
Oh man. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed discussion talking about the rut. It's about to kick off, in certain parts of the South, especially here in Alabama. So I feel like it's a timely episode to put out. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free. We're not afraid of your negative comments either. Of course, we like the encouragement, but let us know how we're doing. If we're terrible, let us know about that too. No big deal.
If you're going to pick at us, you better have thick skin.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
We're going to pick back.
Yeah, we throw it right back at you. No big deal. It goes both ways. But we will this one will be, I believe, the 14th or 15th this should drop. And be getting ready for Christmas and rutcations and all that kind of stuff going on here. So
Absolutely.
it's going to be a lot of fun. Got a lot of stuff coming up for you in the near future too. So stay tuned. We may have some other things going on in social you might want to be aware of too. We'll put more out there as we get closer for some details. But for now, I think that's all we got from the Killing Cabin in Fayette, Alabama.
Have fun. Be safe. Wear your Hunter Orange, guys. They'll
Wear-
write you a ticket.
That's right.
They will. I'm about to go put out some Vitalized Seed on December the 2nd.
There you go.
It has been a crazy year. We just put out our last bag of Vitalized, big bump, but we put out 5 acres worth day before yesterday.
Yep.
Nice.
Well, that's what I'm fixing to go do.
Always great to be planting food plots
In December.
In December.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Welcome to the South. All right, guys. Thanks for listening in, and we will see you next time.